Hello. Oh, welcome. I see a few folks joining us already. We're super excited to have everyone here, and I'm going to give everybody just a minute. It takes, a few seconds for people to move in from the waiting room into this presentation space, but we are very excited to have you all join us for today's webinar or demo, excuse me, using myTeachstone in your continuous quality improvement journey. I am Megan. I'm just the moderator today, so I'll be moving things along and I will pass things off to our lead presenter, Erin Sabina, very shortly. But as everyone is joining, I will cover just a couple of housekeeping tips and notes. So today's presentation is being recorded. Don't worry if you miss anything, if you have to jump off, we will send you the recording tomorrow or the next couple of days. And in that email, we'll send not only the recording, but also the slides and anything else that Erin may touch on today. I think in the past, we've had some relevant blog posts or tips for how to get in touch with your specific class specialist and other great stuff that we'll include in that email. So be sure to look at that. There is no certificate of attendance for our product demonstrations. This is a very high level look at myTeachstone, as we just mentioned, so we don't offer certificates of attendance for information about our products. But we do want this to be super engaging. At Teachstone, our whole thing is interactions, and we love when you're interacting with each other. And I see some hellos in the chat already. So it's nice to see people joining from Vegas, California. I am in Richmond, Virginia myself, and Erin, I know, is in Charlottesville, Virginia, home of the Teachstone headquarters. So without further ado, I'll introduce Erin Sabina, who is an account executive here at Teachstone and has been here for, I always get it wrong, I think 7 years. Is it 7 now?
6.5.
6.5. I'm going to say 7 until it's going to be like,
That's
then it'll
fine.
be 8 years.
We can.
So Erin, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me. And you are not just the moderator. I love having you here with me. So I am Erin Sabina. I have been with Teachstone for 6.5 years. Love doing these demos. myTeachstone is one of the ones that I really am very passionate about. So excited to join you all and hope that everyone else sees how exciting of an offering our myTeachstone subscription is at the end of this webinar here. Hopefully before the end of this webinar. So agenda, I'm going to go over how myTeachstone can help you track and report class data so you can input your observational data into the platform and then use that data to drive your individualized professional development. You can also use that data to drive more programmatic professional development, to coach your educators, even with limited time and resources. I think that's really important, the way that we really support time and bandwidth here and allow you to focus on the coaching relationship. And then lastly, we do have some free opportunities to engage with a community of educators and access responsive resources. And so that's part of the subscription, but you can also get it outside of the subscription as well, that free access. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? I do see a raised hand.
Oh, great. I'm glad you stopped. We are not able to let people unmute on today's presentation, but if you have questions, you can submit them. We have a Q&A box that you can access there in Zoom. That's the best way to get your questions to me and to Erin both. Sometimes things get buried in the chat, so we'll keep an eye on the chat and the questions, but if you have questions specific to today's presentation, be sure to drop it in the Q&A for us. Erin, thanks for flagging that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in looking through the chat, I just noticed we have someone from the UK as well.
Yeah. Welcome.
So let's take a moment to pause and reflect and engage. So think about, and if you can just put your thoughts and reflections in the chat if you'd like to share or just think about them for a moment. What are some of your biggest challenges in improving interactions within your program? So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if we get some reflections in the chat here about biggest challenges improving interactions within your program, staff turnover.
Yep. I was just gonna say, I also do some work on our social media and other webinars that we do at Teachstone. Staff turnover is one that I've been hearing a lot, and I'm curious if this group has seen an increase in challenging behaviors in the classroom. I know that that can make it really hard for educators to focus on interactions when you feel like you're constantly just battling combative behaviors. It's hard to think about being intentional with those interactions. Yeah, challenging behaviors, mental health needs in children too.
And teachers
Mhm.
dealing with burnout. So I had an interesting conversation last week where I was discussing this platform as being a support for a program where we were talking about challenging behaviors, but how that is impacting coaching burnout as well, because the coaches are having to support so much more with coaching teachers through the challenging behaviors and not having opportunity to maybe work on some other coaching initiatives and
Mm.
such.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great point. I also see this like just kind of getting the baseline of helping staff understand why interactions are super important and beneficial to children's outcomes.
Yes, and I see that Laura Wallen mentioned that as well. Staff understanding why it is so important and the implementation in the classroom. So
That's
that
right.
is great. Okay,
Mm.
so this is all great context here to think about what some of your challenges are, so we can discuss some of those and how our platform is able to support. We know interactions matter now more than ever, especially because, as we just discussed, some of these challenging behaviors and just the kind of the atmosphere that we have with staffing in early childhood right now. We really need these positive interactions. We know that research validates that this is not just one more thing for educators to be doing, but really it's the thing that really matters and has the biggest impact. So thinking about the myTeachstone platform, it's research based. So we're going to talk about some of that. It's an all-in-one platform. It's going to provide the tools to do the focusing on what class is, the measuring of those interactions, and improving educator-child interactions, which, as we just mentioned, we know that that is a key factor to drive children's academic and lifelong success, social emotional success, academic success. The class framework. So we definitely focus on class is not just an assessment, it's a system. So the framework here, talk about focus, measure, and improve, as we just mentioned. And in doing so, we're able to really help every child reach their full potential by not just measuring those interactions, but also improving those interactions. The platform now. What is the platform going to offer? So it's going to allow for continuous, seamless, and efficient cycle of improvement. Some of you all may be familiar with practice-based coaching. It's that sort of ongoing CQI, the continuous quality improvement. So being able to do the observation, create an action plan, think through what type of interventions we're going to do those improvement aspects, and then cycle back to remeasure and see how impactful were those interventions that we did. It's built on
Almost
research.
like that.
Oops.
Oh, I was just about to say, it's jumping ahead. Tying back to what you were saying, the focus, measure,
Yeah,
and improve.
yeah, absolutely.
I
So
want-
you can't just measure interactions and expect improvement. You have to actually take that data. What do you do with the data? Use that to inform your professional development, to improve and just be more intentional in some of those really great interactions. Built on research principles that are found to be critical in fostering teacher growth. And we know that just having opportunities for learning and development is critical to fostering teacher growth and teacher retention. And the platform's going to allow for streamlining of some of those key activities. So we'll show you how we can really streamline some of the more administrative work and focus on supporting the teachers and their growth and improvement. Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can jump right in and talk about my Teachstone.
Alrighty. Fantastic. Let me jump to sharing my screen. And can you confirm that you see Elsie's dashboard?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, awesome. So I am signed in as Elsie. Elsie is both a coach and an observer. Some of you may recognize this page that I'm on as being the dashboard that you all use to access various other things, your certification testing, different online courses you may have. So we're going to be talking about the class subscription portion of the platform, which is these two tiles here, observation data and learning resources. So if you have this subscription, there's 4 separate roles that you can have. You can be a teacher, an observer, a coach, and or an administrator. The functionality that you have varies based on the role. You can have multiple roles. So I say that because, as I mentioned, I'm currently logged in as Elsie, and I am logged in as her as a coach. If I wanted to have observer functionality, I would just toggle to the observer role, which I'm going to do to start with. As an observer, you'll see I can create formal observations within the platform. So I'll start with that. It's going to automatically put in the observation date. I can select the center, the teacher, any additional teachers who are in the classroom, and then this data will populate to each of those educators. Age level, language, classroom name. If there's a specific learning environment, you can mark that here. These questions, these are ones that you can actually change what the wording is. They're intended to be sort of a prompt for the teacher when you go back to discuss what the observation was and what was taking place, a prompt of what story was being read at the time, what song was being sung, so that the educator can kind of bring themselves back to that moment and remember what was taking place in the observation. Start the observation. As Megan said, I'm in Virginia, so this is defaulting to Eastern time here, automatically setting for 20 minutes. You can fill out this information here. And you'll see that now down here, I'm able to enter my dimension data down to the indicator level. So if I come into positive climate, I can type in my notes. I can use bullet points, bold, italicize, underline. And I can say that my relationships were high, medium, high, high. And in looking at my manual, I look at this and I read the manual and I think that with high, medium, high, high, that this is a score of a 6, and then I can save it and return to observation. And so I'll show you in a little bit what we can do now that we have this indicator level data. I can go through each of the different dimensions. And I can also upload images and or video. So going back to the practice-based coaching, you can upload the video that is actually taking place of the observation itself to be able to reflect on the actual observation with the educator and point out specific moments tied to the observation. Images might be score sheet, might be a photo of something that you saw in the classroom that you think would be helpful for coaching, whatever you'd like to upload there. And then if I go to review summary, you also have the option to add, these are customizable field names as well. What we have here is strengths, opportunities for growth, and action plan. But the observer, as they're doing the observation, they can be noting some of the strengths for each domain, some opportunities for growth, an action plan. And when we look at the reports, we'll see where this would go into the report. So now that I've created sort of a sample observation here, let me pause for a moment. Megan and Isabella, are there any questions?
No questions so far, but I'm curious, what happens if you click on classroom organization or instructional support right there?
It would just be the same thing.
Oh,
Just
gotcha.
adding the
Okay, cool.
strengths. Yep, just adding the same information for each domain. Thank you for calling that out.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. So now as an observer, I went in and I created this observation. I'm not going to finish it, but instead, so as an observer, you'll see that the observations I have visibility into are the ones that I personally have completed. I'm the observer for each of these. Now, if I wanted to see additional observations for those that I am coaching, I would need to be in my coach role. And now I would be able to see the observation reports for other folks, for each of my teachers. I'd be able to see those observation reports. Okay. In the coach role, if I go to the observations, I'm not actually able to create an observation that is a formal observation. Instead, as a coach, I can only create an informal observation. So just something to note in the different roles here, but it helps really keep those the focus and also the visibility, making sure that we're honoring certain privacy of who has visibility into whom. Okay. So now if I want as a coach to dive a little bit deeper into one of my teachers, I always pick on Leanne here because I know that she has some good data. I can see professional development that's been recommended, and we'll touch on that a little bit more when we go into the learning resources. But I can also see each of her observations. So I can go into a particular observation. I can see the cycle over cycle data. The platform averages everything for you, so you don't have to do the math. I can export this, and you see that there's a variety of different ways to export this data, depending on the type of information you want to be sharing and with whom. You can export scores, no notes, ranges instead of scores, just the notes. Say I want a formal classroom report that's just the ranges. I would just click this button, and just like that, I have this observation report downloaded. It's going to provide the ranges for each of the dimensions. It's going to provide the cycle over cycle, the information about those questions that were asked. And then if you had input the different opportunities for growth and such, that would be in this report as well. Okay. Now coming back to Leanne.
Before we go back to Leanne, we got
Sure.
a good question.
What's that?
For formal, this is from an anonymous person, but happy to ask it. So for formal observations, do you, Teachstone, suggest that someone other than the coach be the one to complete these?
Generally speaking, yes, if it is possible. While we try to reduce any potential biases of an observer, it can be natural, especially as a coach, to have a little bit of that positive bias for your teacher. So ideally, if you have the capacity to have a separate observer from coach for formal observations, that would be the ideal situation.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying. And then we had another question from Julie. Julie, thanks for your question. So just to clarify, these features are all part of my Teachstone subscription. Yes. And we'll go over pricing. I know that often comes up and we're not like hiding it. We're happy to talk about pricing. Just want to get through all of the features before we jump into all of the numbers.
Yes.
So great question. Thank you. And keep them coming. These demos are always great when we can like chat back and forth with you. So thank you both for submitting questions and keep them coming.
All righty. Yes, please.
All right, back to you, Erin.
I'm happy to support however I can with what interests y'all the most with the platform here. So we looked at her observations. We can also see different information about what professional development has been completed. This is about the learning resources, so we'll touch on that. But if I want to look at the actual reporting on the data, I'm going to stick to pre-K for now. I know that she has 2 pre-K observations here. You see these lines, it says goal and average, but those words can also be adjusted, as can the actual numerical value associated. So I say this because if you are a Head Start program, what 2 lines might be helpful for you looking at the scores? So as you may know, with the update to class observations with OHS, there's the competitive threshold and there's the quality threshold. So that could be what those 2 lines that you use are, and compare each individual teacher and your program as a whole to the qualitative and competitive thresholds. You can have those be whatever you would like, though. If you have programmatic goals, you can have them be there. So we're seeing here how this teacher compares to the goal line to the average line. This is through average of her observations during this date range. I could also compare observations. So looking at 2 different dates, I can see how Leanne compared across 2 different observations. If there were 3 or more, I could do a trend analysis to see how she is trending over time. Because as you may see, when you all do professional development, as you focus in one area, it's natural for another area to decrease a little bit. So we want to see how it's trending completely over time. You can isolate domains if you would like. Similarly, you can do the same sort of comparisons for dimension. And now, based on those averages, the system also is looking at what are Leanne's areas of strength down through her opportunities for growth. And we could just go here and go to suggested professional development for coaching purposes. So I want to focus on concept development with Leanne. I can click suggested PD. We'll dive into the learning resources a little bit more in a moment, but you'll see that now these learning resources here are filtered to be teacher resources, because we know Leanne's a teacher, pre-K age level, instructional support domain, concept development dimension, because that's where we just saw we would want to suggest professional development. Okay. Okay. Now, if we want to look at kind of bigger picture professional development reports, again, we can export this information. So if you need to be calculating the number of hours that teachers are spending getting professional development, it's calculated right here in the platform, and you can just download it and export it to wherever you need to. Observation reports. Now this part we're talking about more on a programmatic level. So if I am overseeing various programs, I can filter down to a county level. I could compare if there were more counties in this. I could compare different counties, aggregate different counties, report on specific counties. Similarly here with cities, if I wanted to report just on Charlottesville, I could, just on Richmond. You can also aggregate them together. So if I wanted Charlottesville and Richmond, I could put those into one report together. Same thing with center. So we would customize this to look the way that you need for your reporting within your program, no matter how small or large your program is. So looking at a center, and you can change the date range here. So I'm going to come back. And so there's 15 observations during this time. So I could now download this report, this program report on this center. Again, just downloads really quickly. You don't have to be working in Excel and doing pivot tables and all of that. Provides information on what is class. And here's those charts that we were looking at. Then it also shows what counties make up this report here. If I picked a specific center, so now this is going to be specifically Bright Start. So now we're going to see what teachers make up this center and the reports within this center. So again, I could download program report. This will be just for Bright Start. And it'll show who the different teachers are that comprise this aggregated data. And back on the myTeachstone page, so I just downloaded the program report, but down here I could also download each individual teacher report that is coming together for this program report. So I could just click that button right there. And this is a report for one of the educators. Okay. Do we have any questions on any of the observation or reporting functionality, Megan, before we go over to learning resources?
None from the audience, but I was curious. You had mentioned um, that that drop down would look different depending on like the size of people's programs. Could you give like a couple of examples? I know you've worked with like hundreds of clients who have done this. So what are some different ways that people have like that you might build that out?
Sure. So thinking about a larger Head Start grantee that has Head Start and early Head Start, and maybe you need to report those separately. So you might have the overall grantee branched down into early Head Start and Head Start. Maybe you are thinking about like more of a regional cooperative within your state. And so maybe you have 2 or 3 counties that are rolling up to you and you need to report to specific funders for that county. So it's thinking not just about for coaching and for observation purposes, but also reporting purposes. And
Mm.
what type of aggregated data do you need for various stakeholders?
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for explaining that. We actually had another question come in from Danny. Is there an option to compare fall or spring reports from one classroom to another?
Yeah, great question. So the compare button right here. So as I mentioned, you can do the different date ranges. So say I want to change the date range here. I can say this was August through, let's say January. And then this one was maybe February and center, bright start and compare. So now it's taking the 8 that were completed in the first half of the year, the 6 that were completed in the second half of the year, and doing a comparison. Here it would be on the
Ooh, that's
domains.
cool.
Here it would be on the
Nice.
dimensions. Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, we really try to take as much of that more administrative work off of plate so that you can focus on the actual coaching, because doing the
Yes.
manual labor of the reporting and creating graphs and all of that, that's not nearly as impactful as sitting down and having that coaching conversation.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Jody wrote in the chat, this is amazing. I've been creating my own classroom and program reports. So I imagine that's would save you quite a bit of time.
Absolutely. Yes. Saves, I imagine, a tremendous amount of time. And that's not even getting over to when we get to the learning resources portion. And actually, while we're still
Perfect.
on reporting, that reminds me, I have one more that I wanted to show that I have pulled open over here. I mentioned when we were doing the observation that we can get to the indicator level and that I would show one of the ways that that's impactful with reporting. So here's another sample report. In this instance, the indicator level was selected and then reported upon as one of the selections when you're picking which way you want to report. So we've got the graphs and such as we've seen, but now we have this automatically generated feedback and it's based on the indicators that were selected. So there are many, there are frequent, consistently demonstrate. We know all of those are words that reflect high. So ultimately positive climate was high. Similarly, teacher sensitivity, consistently aware, sometimes effective. And so we know that those that down here, these are kind of more mid, consistently aware is in the high range, but ultimately the dimension is going to be in the mid range when you aggregate those indicators. And so it's just explaining based on those indicators, what does that actually mean as far as the indicator level and the dimension level and the interactions taking place.
That's awesome. We have two more quick questions,
Sure.
and then I'm going to hold a few more for the end or as we get further into the presentation. So one, is my Teachstone available in Spanish?
It is. So two things that we'll see with that. So one is that if you are just in your user settings, you can come in here and you can change your preference within the platform as a whole. So I could change this. I gotta hide some of these Zoom features that keep popping up. You could change your language preference here to Spanish. And so now my platform is in Spanish. I am not fluent in Spanish, so I'm going to change it back to English here. But as we get into the learning resources, which we'll get into more in a moment, you'll see we also have supports for dual language learners, and we have supports that are specifically in Spanish.
That's great. Thank you. And then very quickly before we move on to more of the learning resource side, because we got a few questions about that. How long are back on the reporting page? How long does observation data stay in the platform? Like, can you pull back from years previous?
Yep, it stays in the platform indefinitely. And so that's actually a good call out as far as the staff retention and that challenge that we'll dive into a little bit more when we get into pricing. But just so you know, the pricing is going to be tied to the quantity of teachers. So as you have staff attrition, what we would do is we would deactivate the user who left and activate a new user. And I say this now just so that you know that even if you lose the teacher, you don't lose the data. That data stays in the platform, so you can still report back on teachers who are no longer in the system as well.
All right, I'm gonna hold. There's a lot of questions coming in. Thank you. Please keep them coming in. I will note. I'll try to answer a few via chat while Erin moves on to the next portion of the demo, and then we'll have more time. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, so now diving into the learning resources. So we saw how we could have the learning resources already filtered based on observation data, but you can also come in here and search for specific resources. We do have resources as well for administrators and such, but I am in as a coach, so I have the option for coach and teacher. I could find coaching resources if I wanted to find some resources for myself, or if I'm looking to show something to a teacher, I can filter to teacher resources. We have resources available as videos, links, PDFs, and courses, and you can see the image that corresponds. And if it's a video or a course, we also show roughly how long that's going to take. We know teachers don't have the most time necessarily, so we have resources that you see we have 15 minutes, 8 minutes. We also have resources that are as short as 1 minute. So this way you have an idea of how much time you're asking of from the teacher. We have dual language, family childcare, and Sesame Street is a fantastic addition as well. English and Spanish. So there was the question about Spanish. You'll see if the video is listed as being Spanish, the video itself is going to be in a Spanish-speaking classroom, and all of the supports that go along with it are in Spanish. And then when you're purchasing the subscription, you're receiving all of the age levels, which I find super helpful, especially if you have early Head Start and Head Start, or maybe you're a childcare that has infant, toddler, pre-K, school age. You're receiving all of the resources here for the different age levels. So you can filter by age level, by domain, by dimension, add that you want it to be a video. And I could even add, so I have it filtered to concept development, and maybe I want concept development to be at mealtime. So I could even add the filter here. So now I see that I have 5 options of videos that are focused on concept development and supporting at mealtime. If I want to go into one of the shorter videos, you'll see this one is focused specifically on concept development. Shows the dimension here. If I mouse over, it tells me what to look for as I watch the video. And then we're also going to be able to dive into the indicator level and call out specifically when these indicators are reflected in this video and provide reflective questions. So this supports the coach not only in being able to make sure that this is a video that actually meets what their goals are for the coaching session, but also providing reflective questions. They don't have to do that in advance. They don't have to watch the video and come up with all the questions and such in advance. We've done all of that, taken that work off the coach's plate so they can support the actual coaching. So now I could just click recommend and share this to all the teachers I matched with. I can create teacher groups if I have cohorts of teachers. I can say I want to share this with my Bright Start pre-K teachers, which is 3 teachers. And I also want to share it. I'm going to pick on Leanne again. I can enter any sort of notes here. I saw a question about teachers not seeing that they had resources shared to them. An extra button that you can select when sharing the resources is this checkbox right here. Send an email to notify users of this recommendation. So that would send them an email alerting the teachers to come into the platform that they have resources waiting for them. So I could do all that. I'm going to not send this now, but then also once they come into the platform, they would see the resources recommended with the little notification bell right here. There would be a little number there indicating that they had resources available. They could click it and go into their notifications and access. Also, you can go into My Professional Development and see what has been shared with you. You can see the recommendations and access them. Now, if I go into, I'm going to pick on Leanne again. If I go into her professional development, I can see that I, as Elsie, shared these resources with Leanne. This is what I sent. I sent a little note along with the resource. My administrator can see what I shared with Leanne. So this way you can coach your coaches a little bit, guide them on if maybe there was a better resource, or if you would prefer to focus on a specific area for coaching. But then within the actual video, I can have a back and forth as coach. I can have a back and forth with the teachers that I've shared this with separately. And the administrators cannot see that back and forth so that we're still honoring and respecting the privacy of the coach-teacher relationship. Okay. I'm going to show one more video type offering or option that we have here, and then pause to see if there's more questions. So going back to videos, if we have a longer video, we're not going to be able to get to the indicator level of each dimension. So instead, for the dimensions, we're going to show the really great moments, but the going further is also the opportunities for growth. So I know we get feedback sometimes that, of course, the teacher was great during those 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes. They, you can do really great interactions for 2 minutes, etc. There's always opportunities for growth, no matter how great the interactions are. There's still ways to improve. And so we have videos here showing some of those opportunities for growth and calling those out as well. So the teacher sometimes has a flat affect that doesn't match the children's affect. So here's a way that we could maybe be a little bit more intentional in our interactions. And then again, reflective questions. This not only supports the coaching, but also think about teacher self-study and teachers being able to come in, look at what is interesting to them and reality check what they're thinking as they're watching the videos. Okay. All right, so let me pause there. What other questions do we have at the moment?
We have a couple. So quick reminder, we will send out this recording and the slides via email. And then questions about this actually goes back to observation data, but Sharon's asking, can I enter data from previous years to show growth over time? So like when you initially onboard with myTeachstone.
That is a fantastic question, and you would not need to be the one to do that. We have an implementation team and our implementation specialist who would be supporting the building of your account. They can input all of that data. They would provide you with a template for you to fill out, and then we would do the work to upload all of that data. But long answer short, yes, absolutely. We can put the back data in so you're not starting from scratch.
I love those. Yes, and there's more. um, let's see. We have another question. I am an English speaker coach. How can I ensure that the Spanish videos show the interactions that I want for my teacher?
That is a fantastic question. That's a good question because I know I would actually defer to one of our client success managers for that because thinking about that, unless if you're putting it like in Google Translate, since it is already in Spanish, that
So that's
is,
what Juliet responded to that person and said, you can turn on the closed captioning and
yeah,
see the closed captioning in English.
yeah.
I didn't know if Aaron, if you had another suggestion, but Juliet, that's a great answer. Thank you for chiming
Well,
in.
so because the way I was thinking about it is that as an English speaker, but that I'm thinking about it from the coaching perspective of as an English speaker being able to access the video in English, but then change the language in the platform to Spanish, but then the video is still in English. So for the
Right.
reverse, if you're thinking from the teacher perspective, yeah, I think that would be the best way, the best kind of workaround for the coach to support the teacher in their native language.
hmm hmm Yeah. Can we see what this looks like? So you're still in the coach view. Is there a way to see what this looks like from the teacher's perspective in my Teachstone?
Yes, let me stop sharing so that I can pull up a teacher login information page, and I can do that. And
Great question, Marianne. We gotcha.
while I'm doing that, is there any other questions that I can answer? Uh,
Yeah. So we had somebody ask to the Q&A portal a very specific question about adding their observations into a state platform. Anonymous, I have forwarded that question over to our client success team, and we're working to get you an answer because I don't know off the top of my head if it integrates with Link B5. So looking into that, and hopefully we can write a response to you in the chat. And then we had another question, but I'll hold that because I see you're about to screen share. So teacher side.
all right, so because Elsie is not a teacher, in this instance, I need to log out and log in as a different user. Okay, so from a teacher side, it's going to look very similar. Again, I'm picking on Leanne because she is my teacher of choice here with all her data. But you see here, it looks the same on the dashboard page. Teacher is going to be able to see if they have observations in progress, upcoming, or completed. Notice I cannot click into the observation to actually see the data. I just see the date, who the observer was, if it's formal or informal, and what the age level is. And then I don't have options for my teachers because I am a teacher. I'm not coaching anyone. I don't have options for reporting because I'm not going to be pulling reporting, but I can see my professional development. And so this is similar as you just saw to what Elsie saw. I can click in here and see what Elsie has recommended to me. I can come into the video. I can share my thoughts back with Elsie, and I see all the same information down here. So I can do that same self-study. I just can't recommend the resource to anybody. And I would have my notifications here if there were any new resources that had been shared to me that I hadn't looked at the notification for yet. Okay. Is that helpful?
I think so. Thank you.
All right. Absolutely.
All right, we got another question from Joyce. Joyce is asking about, is there an allowance to indicate IEPs or developmental issues that are different, showing supports to the teachers to show progress from the teacher, coaching and learning encounters? So I think, Joyce, maybe what I'm gathering from your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like, are there places within the system during observations to note that there are children in the classrooms with developmental needs or IEPs? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Erin, I think that there are some places to add notes in the observations for that.
Yeah, so there's actually, if I come back into it, I'm going to log out of being a teacher. I will log back into being a coach. And so if I'm creating, when I'm creating the observation, I need to be an observer. So this is the one that I had in progress. You can see when we first started on this page under learning environment, that it's a special education classroom is one of the options here. Similarly, when we're actually in the observation, if you wanted, when we get to the review summary, observation summary notes, you might want to put something like that there if it's, say, a mixed classroom and there's inclusive, if it's an inclusive classroom.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another question while you're in the observer side, can you talk a little bit more about the differences between the informal and formal observations?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to switch to the coach side for that. So we saw what it
Oh,
looks like
thanks.
to do a formal observation. If I switch to the coach side and try to create an observation, and I do an informal, same information here. Lead teacher, age level. I have to fill out all of this. And then I start the observation. Big thing that you'll notice, we can only put notes. You can't put scores, can't put indicators. And so the big kind of difference between formal and informal, formal, you're going to be following the observation guidelines set forth by Teachstone. So you're going to be doing 20 minutes. You're going to be doing the ideally more than one cycle, and focusing on all of the entirety of the tool, all of the domains, dimensions, indicators, etc. An informal observation, maybe you're going in just to check out how they're doing with instructional learning formats. You're coaching on instructional learning formats and you're focused specifically on that dimension and you're just taking notes. Maybe you're just doing a 10-minute cycle instead of a 20-minute. But really it's the formal are those ones where you're really collecting the data, and informal is more so you're going in to get a bigger picture, or a more granular picture, diving into specific areas.
I also want to add on to that. We have a really great blog post that just kind of talks about informal observations and how they're beneficial. So I'll drop that in the chat. It's not specific to myTeachstone, so it doesn't mention the platform, but it does give a free download that you can use to, if you want to implement more informal observations as a coach.
Fantastic.
Alrighty, I feel like we might be caught up. We have a couple of questions about pricing, and I know that's coming up next in the demo. So back to me for screen sharing. Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty.
Okay, so pricing. It's $2,500 for up to 25 teachers. That means you can have fewer than 25 teachers in the platform, but if you have 20 teachers, if you have 25 teachers, it'll be that $2,500. It's an additional $100 for each additional teacher. So if you have 30 teachers, it's $3,000. There is an additional 10% setup fee just for the first year, and that's because of that robust implementation that we do to get you all started, building out the account, building out the hierarchy, being able to input previous data, etc. So honestly, and this is, again, this is a teacher cost. There's no cost for observers. There's no cost for coaches. There's no cost for administrators. You're all there to support the educators in their professional development. And again, the cost is based on the quantity of teachers. It's not tied to the individual teachers. So if somebody leaves in the middle of the year and you bring on a new teacher and the quantity hasn't changed, the cost doesn't change. We just deactivate the teacher who left. You still have their data. We activate the new teacher and the cost stays the same. It's nice and easy.
And do those teacher roles, do they need to be the lead teacher? We had a question about, do we have to have each lead teacher enrolled in myTeachstone to be able to add observations for that classroom?
That's more a conversation that you can have with your individual sales consultant, because it varies from program to program and what your goals are. So if you want it to be all of your lead teachers, absolutely, it can be your lead teachers. If you are doing something else with your lead teachers and really you want to focus on your co-teachers, your assistant teachers, what have you, they can be who you have in the platform, and just know that that data is the same for the lead teachers who aren't in the platform. If you want every person who interacts with kids in the platform, they can all be in it. It really depends on your individual program.
Mm-hmm. And I have kind of directed a couple of the Q&As that have come in to connect with your class consultant. So we have people who are really familiar with what's going on in your state and some of the curriculum, or that you might also be using, or portals that you have to upload data to. I don't have a lot of information. I wish I could answer some of those specific questions, but if you have some more like nuanced questions about how this works specifically for your program or your state, I dropped in the link in the chat there. So I would recommend filling that out, because then you'll get connected to somebody who knows a lot more about your specific state than I do.
Yes.
Could be Erin.
Might be. If you're in the West, it might be.
Yeah. All right. So we have a question from Margaret. Are there any higher ed institutions using Teachstone in their teacher prep programs?
Yes.
Yes.
I can't name any off the top of my head, but I know that I've had conversations, and that's one of the ways that it's a more individualized implementation, because the intention initially is more for classroom usage. But yes, I have seen programs using it both for the way that they're evaluating teachers who are going into classrooms, but also for providing that professional development for various semesters of educators. It is just a little bit more nuanced to the setup. Similarly, definitely higher ed programs that have lab schools. I've definitely set up the platform with them.
And I was trying to find very quickly some blogs, again, because we have some examples of how some specific programs have implemented it in their higher ed program, but I'm not fast enough today to find that blog. But I can include that on in the follow-up communication, Margaret, so you can see some more examples of what that can look like.
And doing a quick search, because you know how I am, Margaret, I'm also your point of contact. So reach out to me and we can have a conversation about it.
See, I said it could be Erin that you might get connected to, so that's cool. Okay, so we had another question, kind of just summarizing what we've seen. So thank you, Jody, for this. So just to summarize, there's an admin view, coach view, and a teacher view. There's also an observer view. And then the question is, can coaches see the class reports and scores?
Yes, so coaches can see the class reports and scores for any teachers that they are tied to. So if you are the coach of an educator, you can see their data. If you are the observer who conducts the observation, you can see the data. And so that's why I was differentiating the role, because you may need to toggle the role. If you're logged in as an observer, you may just need to toggle to the coach role to see that data. And then the administrator can see the data of anybody under them. So depending on what level they're at, if they're over just a specific site, or if they're over all of Head Start, etc., they have that visibility.
And from the admin view, you can see everything on the dashboard, correct? Danny says, I'm unable to see anything except observations. Oh, Susie, sorry.
So let me look at this program. Let me look at this program real quick, because there's a possibility that I know what is going on. Where is this
Okay.
located?
And while you
They can tell me where they're located. Oh, Mount Hood Community College. Okay. Mount Hood Community College. That's one that I just worked on. So yeah, just reach out to me and we'll work through that.
Perfect. And I shared the slide with your email address, and I dropped your LinkedIn in there because you're always sharing such really inspiring and insightful posts. So I would strongly suggest following Erin on LinkedIn. And then I'll drop in that link to connect with your rep, because Erin might not be your rep. We have amazing reps all over the country. Erin does focus a lot on the West, but there's a whole amazing team. So use that form to find out who you should be connected with. Alrighty. So did I miss any questions? Okay, that we got that person. Can a formal observation for a teacher be done in emotional support domain?
Not a formal one. If you're focused on just a domain or dimension, that would be informal. So the formal observation is always going to be all of the domains and dimensions.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have 4 more minutes. I think I got most of the questions or all the questions from the chat, but we'll stick around if there's more. If not, thank you all for joining us today. It was great. I love having this back and forth with you all. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And we hope to hear from you. If there's anything else that you'd like to see, whether it's myTeachstone or not, like I said, we'll stick around for a couple more minutes and offer some more. Great. We got some more questions. And if you need to run, that's fine too. Okay, Erin, Mary's asking the difference between formal and informal.
Yep. So formal is the specific observation style that you're taught in observation training. So the quantity of, so like the number of minutes, so I think it's 15 for infant, but it's 20 for the other age levels, and focusing holistically on all of the behavioral markers, indicators, dimensions, domains, doing that really formal view of the classroom. Informal is like anything outside of that. So if you're not giving scores, if you're focused on a specific domain, specific dimension, you're doing a shorter observation cycle. So it's more used for the actual coaching and evaluating, you know, where you are in between those formal observations. I hope that answers the question there.
I think so. Let us know if it didn't. I also got a note back to our anonymous person who was asking about link B5. We got a note back to definitely connect with your state rep, because they'll have more information and can walk through like the details. So again, I dropped that link in there again. I, as the marketing team member, would be remiss if I didn't talk about some more of our upcoming events and webinars, because I see there's still 100 of you still on here. So I am going to also drop a link to our upcoming webinars that we have. We have one on coaching professional development. And specifically, if you are a coach, this is great because we have a product for providing feedback to teachers, how to provide feedback and what impactful feedback can look like. And then we have another product about instructional support strategies specifically. I know that domain is always one that people want to spend a lot of time on. And so this offers a lot of really helpful strategies on instructional support and how you can coach educators on that domain specifically. And so that's next week on Wednesday. And then we have another one coming up for anybody who might be more of like the admin role, or maybe you're wearing multiple hats within your program. And it's not about any of our products, but we're just talking about resiliency and what this looks like in terms of all of the challenges that were mentioned earlier in the presentation. We've got, we'll be talking about learning loss, we'll be talking about those challenging behaviors, and we'll be talking about staff turnover. It's kind of unavoidable. I know that that's happening everywhere in the country, unfortunately. So we'll just be sharing some thoughts with each other. And again, it'll be another interactive session. So I hope you can join us. That's next Thursday on September, next Thursday? Nope, 2 Thursdays from now. Both of these are in 2 weeks. I'm jumping ahead. So on the 13th and 14th. So you can register for those at our upcoming event page. Erin, anything else you want to add today?
Just while we're still on this page, that class learning community. So we mentioned early on about free
Yes.
resources within the platform as well. Class learning community, highly recommend you get it as part of access to the subscription. But also, if you just go to that link that Megan just put in the chat, you can sign up to be part of our class learning community. It's a place to be able to connect with class users, not just within your program, like the subscription does, but with class users all around the country, all around the world. We have some of our Teachstone class specialists in there. I respond to questions. Megan responds to questions. You have a lot of various resources, and it's a great way to not need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. You can pose some of your questions, learn from others who have been in the same situation. There's great downloadable resources. Our community manager aggregates some of those conversations into nice downloadable PDFs. Great free resource there.
Okay, and I'm going to sneak this in. I know we're 1 minute over, but we have one more question just about helping parents understand about interactions, and we have a product for that. So I'm just going to drop that in there. It's meaningful interactions at home. I don't know if you have like a 1 minute elevator pitch for meaningful interactions at home.
Yep. So it is a 1 hour webinar that you can have for up to 25 families. I say families because we provide 25 sets of materials, and you can have up to 2 adults per family. And it's a way to really empower parents to understand how to really capitalize on some of those opportunities for great interactions over the dinner table. Excuse me. Is while you're playing with your child, reading a bedtime book, bath time, etc. How do you really engage in those meaningful, impactful interactions?
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're 2 minutes over, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know there's still quite a few of you on the line, but we really enjoyed this call this afternoon. And Erin, thank you so much for leading us through the demo. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you all, and hope to hear from some of you soon.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.